Good evening. Welcome to this second webinar organized by Tilottama Foundation. Tilottama Foundation is glad to present a special lecture titled Short-Term and Long-Term Economic Repercussions of the COVID-19 Crisis on the 18th of April today. And this lecture is being delivered by Dr. Anjan Chakraborty. He is an associate professor at the UGC Human Resource Development Center. Dr. Chakraborty is the editor of the book Interrogating Development Perspectives on the Economy, Environment, Ethnicity and Gender. Dr. Chakraborty has carried on various research projects over the years, and these include a project entitled Traffic and Transportation Policies and Strategies in Urban Areas in India, commissioned by Ministry of Urban Development to develop traffic and transportation policy and strategies for Gangtok. For a number of years, he has served as a member of the monitoring team for the evaluation of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan in Sikkim under the aegis of the Ministry of Human Resource Development. He has also worked as a consultant on the preparation of Sikkim Vision Document 2020. Dr. Chakraborty has worked as a partner in the execution of WWF India project, which has been funded by IDRC, which was entitled Documentation, Traditional Ecological Knowledge and Capacity Building Needs of Traditional Institutions for Sustainable Utilization of Natural Resources in Sikkim and Darjeeling Hills, Eastern Himalaya. Dr. Chakraborty, we are very glad he had also held the position of Senior Advisor at Tilottama Foundation since 2019. So today he is delivering this talk on the short-term and long-term effects, economic effects of the COVID-19 crisis. And without further ado, I would request him to begin the lecture, and after that, we can have a few questions. So over to you, Dr. Chakraborty.
Okay, thank you very much, Tilottama Foundation, Shoham, and other members of Tilottama Foundation for giving me an opportunity to ponder over an issue which is really a very serious issue, in the sense that two kind of threat we are facing. Not only we are, the entire globe is almost facing precisely that the outbreak of this coronavirus, which took almost, as the figures suggested by Johns Hopkins University, it is 2 lakh, more than 2 lakh people. They have been already been affected by this particular coronavirus. With more than 1.5 lakh people have already died. So far India is concerned, the figure is much less. It's something around, say, 6,761, and we have a kind of people who died. This coronavirus attack is 206. Nevertheless, this particular pandemic is cutting across the countries, and the nature and magnitude yet to be understood by the entire world, because the virus itself remain undefined, and how it can be taken care of, how people can be, what we say, that what kind of treatment that can make people cure from this particular thing is yet to be understood. So therefore, the first thing is that so far the threat to life is concerned, it remains large over the entire world. And the second and important thing is that the so-called developed countries like America, US, and the entire Europe, they are the worst sufferer. Even 70% death has occurred in the Europe. And how to tackle this particular situation, India took a kind of a measure, which we precisely call lockdown. That initially it was for 21 days, then it has been extended till 3rd May. And all the people of India, it's almost 1.66 billion people of India, they have been asked to stay at home, and certain kind of practices that we have been advised to do. Unlike Hong Kong or Singapore, they are the countries they went for kind of a constant aggressive test, and through that they try to combat that particular situation. So now country like us, having a kind of 136 crore people, is very difficult to adapt that kind of strategy. So that strategy to save this particular country from this pandemic is possibly the best strategy we have adopted. That is that people, they should get locked down at their house. And so for the world is concerned, they certainly praised India's effort, the way India is tackling the particular situation of this particular pandemic. Now the question is that, okay, fair enough that we are fighting this coronavirus threat, and people are really spirited to follow the norms and regulations as well as the medical personnel in our country. They put, sorry, excuse me, they put up their, rather I can say, the life for the service of the nation. Uh, for that matter, even we remain throughout our life, we remain indebted to them. That will be insufficient. But the most crucial thing and important thing that we are now going to face, that is the economic epidemic, because there is a kind of a threat of coronavirus, and that epidemic is there. But we have an unprecedented kind of economic scenario that we are confronting now, which is really a issue in the sense that even if people, they survive the coronavirus, threat of coronavirus, they may die because of hunger, and because of lack of food, they may die. So that situation is really kind of a situation which was unprecedented in the sense, possibly after the independence we never faced this kind of situation, because we had a Bengal famine, experience of Bengal famine, and beyond that, possibly this kind of scenario we never come across. So in that way, the magnitude, the seriousness of this economic epidemic is really great. And now the measures that have been already being taken or being thought of or being pushed forward by government of India, along with the various state government, that needs to be looked at closely, and we need to come out with some kind of suggestions. Maybe it's not a kind of a foolproof suggestions, but we need to think some alternative, or the existing economic structure, the way it had been handled for last many years, especially since 1991, the economic model that we are following, that also need to be looked closely. The reason being that certain inherent economic imbalances that is already there in the system, and now this after the outbreak of this particular pandemic, uh, that become more glaring in the sense so that now we are thinking that, okay, we have followed this policy, and the outcome of that policy is this, and now we have a kind of this kind of epidemic, and the economic impact is so severe that how to tackle it that. Now, having said so, now briefly I'll say that what government of India did so for the economy is concerned, that we have some financial measures which we call it monetary policy, we have adopted, and secondly, we have taken some fiscal measures. Now, so for the monetary measures is concerned, with twice the RBI governor makes some announcement, and especially there is a cut in repo rate as well as reverse repo rate. In addition to that, there is a certain kind of moratorium of paying repayment of loan, and as well as the interest payment. There is a moratorium for 3 or 4 months. And again, 5 billion rupees, 5 billion rupees have been infused for the non-banking financial sectors, as well as the like NABARD, SIDBI, that is all this non-banking financial institutions, as well as the for microfinance institutions. The money has been injected by the Reserve Bank of India. Now see that this repo rate cut, whether it is reverse repo rate cut or repo rate cut, it means that the meaning is simple, that all of you know that it's that kind of a the repo rate is kind of the interest that RBI charges to the commercial banks when they are borrow money from the Reserve Bank. And reverse repo rate is just the opposite. It is the commercial bank, they get from the Reserve Bank when Reserve Bank borrow the money from the central bank. So both have been slashed. It's slashed down to 4%. And further, the repo rate has been reduced to 3.75%. Cash reserve ratio which is the amount of deposits of the public. A certain percentage has to be kept with the Reserve Bank. That's brought down to 3%. And in addition to that, as I told, that $500 billion, 500 billion money has been added to this one, so that it has been given to the money has been pumped in for the non-income financial segment. Now, this is one half of the story. This is the financial measure. That means we pumped in money in the economy, or we ensure that adequate liquidity should be there in the hand of the banks, all kind of banks, so that there should be no dearth of loan. Because if there is a rate cut, then naturally the rate of interest will be reduced. And if rate of interest get reduced, the loan would be, borrowing would be much more easier, number one. And those who have already taken a loan, so for them, like EMI, which we call that EMI, the burden of interest would be certainly be lower. It would be reduced by a certain percentage. And if you take a fresh loan, certainly again the rate of interest would be low. So that means the borrowing is become easier for the every segment of the economy. For today, for as we stand today, that every segment of the economy can borrow money at a lesser rate from the bank or non-banking financial institutions. So this is the monetary measure that we have taken, and the fiscal measure, that is 1,72,000 crore rupees have been earmarked by the government for this particular for the economy, for the people, to give some kind of cash and food support to the system. Now, are this system adequate? The question is that. Now, the first, if we take up the issues from the first segment, that okay, we have created borrowing easier. We have added enough liquidity to the economy. Now, if we added enough liquidity to the economy, the investors of all kinds, they find it easier. Now, the question is that economy has come to an halt, complete halt, when the lockdown has started. But there was a recession since 2019. The recession was started, and economic growth was it's gradually slowing down and coming sequentially hovering around between 4.5% or 5%, or closer to 4% at some time. And the worst part is that industrial growth of industrial production is become negative. The major sectors like civil aviation, then your telecommunications, then a part of construction, especially the like house building and all. These are the sectors were already taken together. There was a kind of a negative growth over there. Now, if it is a negative growth in those sectors, so already the recession was started, and there was a huge job cut was taking place in those sectors. So this is point number one. Now, given that scenario, the industrial sector is already facing, and there was a kind of a cut down in the what do you say, that corporate interest rate. It has been announced by our finance minister that it will be brought down to 30%, so that corporate sector find it easier to take a loan. Now, the question is that it's a supply side management. That means there's a supply side intervention. I am adding money to the economy. That means I am ensuring that there should be a supply of money. But the question is that taking A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, say these are the producers, all kind of producers. Now, why do they produce? Because whatever they have produced till now, they don't find the takers. So therefore, there is a slash down in the production, and that's the precisely the result that they are facing a kind of a negative growth. That is the first part. And the second part is very important. Now, at this moment also, if we inject money, when the Reserve Bank has injected, certainly it will reduce the volatility in the in our share market. But so far, the corporate sector are concerned, already they are facing a huge kind of a lockdown situation, and they have not only slashed their employees, but to start their productions, there was a huge supply shock is there. That means what they will supply, there's an uncertainty in the supply. So when there is a uncertainty in the supply, and if there is no adequate demand in the economy, it's very difficult for the economic revival. Now, our intervention was more supply driven. We never try to increase the demand side of the economy. Now, if demand side of the economy has to be raised, then what precisely required is the income of the people that has to be raised. Because if the income of the people, if it is being raised, then they will go for different kind of purchases, and that will raise the demand. And the bulk of the domestic demand, it comes from not people like those who are salaried people from them, but bulk of the demand, it lies in the rural sector as well as the semi-urban sector. Now, here lies the major problem, because the rural areas and the semi-urban areas, the people, the type of employment they were having, now they are in a real dilemma. Just I will give you some data that what is the segregation of this particular different segment categories of employees. Now, if we say the daily wage earner, it is a little old estimate. Still, it is something around 16% in the urban areas and 29% in the rural areas. This is those who earn their livelihood in terms of daily wage. Next is the self-employed group. Self-employed group is basically people who are in the agrarian sector. It's something around 30%. If you take the informal sector into account, because part of the people, they move during the slack season, they move to the nearby urban areas and join some other work, manual work, and try to get some amount of income. That's precisely called the income. So say informal sector. So together this 40%. Now, migrant labor. Now, why do the labor migrate, and from where they migrate and where to migrate? Now, precisely if you follow the migration pattern of the laborers, we'll find it is the eastern region, especially the Bihar or West Bengal, part of Assam. From there, they move to especially the western India as well as the southern part of India, because there the service sector that was growing and industrial hub was there, because these are the region is not the industrialized region. So therefore, if there is uncertainty in agriculture, if there is uncertainty in the nearby rural, nearby urban areas, and there is a differential of wages, then the huge number of people, laborers, they migrate to those regions. And this percentage is something, the number is something around 4.5 crore or 8%, 8.5%. And among them 3.5% of the temporary in nature. And these migrants, when they got locked down, because those regions where the major economic activities were taking, those got closed down, those got shut down. And these migrant laborers, there are no takers of this migrant laborers, and those people we have seen on the road, some of them are working, some of them are dying, and we become conscious about the migrant laborers. But it's the economic reality of certain segments. That means maybe the eastern region economic structure is such that a certain portion of the people has to migrate. Kerala is also a state where people migrate large number in the Gulf regions also, and they send enough remittances to the Kerala. But again, the way Kerala handle the migrant laborers, possibly the other state do not handle it in the same way. So therefore, there is another group of people whose livelihood is under serious threat. And the third segment is that salaried class. Now, regular salaried people, be it private sector and government sector together, is something 19%. And since the onset of the economic reforms, this particular percentage, government sector employment is shrinking, and it is shrinking and shrinking. The reason that the government sector is shrinking. Therefore, hardly jobs are available at the government sector. So we have to rely on the private sector. And private sector is mostly the manufacturing sector and service related sector. If I say now, after this onset of this COVID virus, especially the services also got a bad, like be it hotel, be it transport business, communications, everything having no business at all. So therefore, if you take the manufacturing on the industry as well as the services together, there would be, even in the salaried people, there would be a job cut. Already the job cut was there. So now it is expected that around 7 to 8%, 10% job cut will take place in the private sector, because private sector, until unless they are getting profit, they are not going to feed the people with their penny. So they don't waste a penny for non-economic reasons. So this is another problem that's looking large, because that revival of that particular segment, it's not a kind of a one-day phenomenon. And until unless the demand segment is being taken care of, this will remain a dream that India will be a higher growth trajectory. Now, having said so, if you look the total employment scenario, that means 80% of the people, they do not have any guarantee of employment, number one. And number two, their employment is very much uncertain in nature. And number three is that if demand has to come, then demand has to come from these 80% of the people. If you look at the economic structure, if you follow the economic growth pattern of India, even we reached a growth level of 9% at times. The income inequality was proportionately increases in India. So even from 2014 to, if we take the 2018, we have seen there's a huge growth, almost there's a 260% growth of income of 1% of the population. And the present scenario is that 1% of the population is holding 73% of the wealth of the country. Now, if that is the economic reality, we cannot do away with this economic reality. So therefore, if 80% has to be taken care of, then demand has to come from these 80% people, and income has to be generated for these 80% people. Now, at this moment, it's not an easy task to create demand, because the major threat is that it is the life and livelihood. Now, possibly the life and livelihood has to be taken care of together. Now, a couple of things can be thought of in these directions. Now, we have kind of a different social projects. So, this in last particular budget, there is a huge increase in the rural development allotment. Number one, almost 75% hike in the rural development. Number one, but there is a consistently the cut down in the two segments, that is the health and another is the education. So health expenditure is something like 1.4% or 1. It has been enhanced 1.8%, and education is 3.4%. And the entire health segment is in the hand of the private players. So that means we have failed to create a kind of a health structure where the government presence can be felt, or government can take care of the people. So therefore, if we look from the live perspective, so therefore the government health structure in no way can take care in long-term manner, because over the years the entire health segment has been given in the hand of the private sector, or which is called the corporate medical sector, number one. And there the poor people do not have any room. And the government health sector is, the condition is we generally, supposing people like us, we never thought of to go to a government hospital or to kind of a rural healthcare center. So if that be the scenario, so, and if this kind of pandemic prevails, so we need to think that how the health segment can be reoriented. What we did basically, that we rather focused on giving more insurance to the people. Now, insurance to the people like us, we are insuring ourselves, and government is also providing the insurance. What it means that I will be treated in a private sector, and the money that will be required by the provided by the government. So therefore, basic health care as well as the entire health segment is hardly got attention of the government, and at this particular juncture it's very difficult to reverse this particular situation because this long-term intervention is required. Number two, that there are a lot of social schemes that has been there. I read that almost 122 total schemes have been declared in the last budget. Out of that, many are in the social sector. But if roughly we take the big scheme like Manrega, now, Manrega, again, there was a cut down in the kind of a budget allocation that took place in the last budget. There's a cut down in, though the wage rate has been increased. We have a public distribution system. We have a kind of a system of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan where the children used to get food. Then we have a certain kind of housing facility for the poor, gas connections for the poor, and the some kind of the ration system is something like that, that some amount of something a particular family can get something around 50 kg of rice and wheat, and the dal has been added to that. Now if that be the case, now if you see the procurement that took place, that because last year harvest was quite good, so PDS system, that means in public distribution system, we have enough food grain, so there's no dearth of food grain. What we do not have, that if these people, if their job and employment will remain as uncertain for another couple of months, or maybe 6 months or 7 months, or more than that, then these people will find extremely difficult to survive. So therefore, one method should be that whatever being distributed in the public distribution system, the item should be reformulated. I think Kerala is doing a nice job in that matter, that they are not only provide, because if you provide rice and wheat and some amount of dal, that is not sufficient for a person who is not having any income. You require some amount of potato, you require some amount of protein, like say for example soybean or eggs, and maybe some amount of mustard oil and salt. So if already the money that is being earmarked for this particular segment, that money is diverted to have a kind of a proper distributions of food basket to the people, because we have almost 82 crore people who are having ration card holder. Now America has already invested 10% of their GDP, and we have only allocated 1% of our GDP, less than 1% of our GDP for this for the social to take care of the people who are having the uncertainty. So having said so that needs to be reoriented. And the second and important thing is that community kitchen should be part of our development agenda now. And this community kitchen should be linked with the public distribution system, as well as there are various self-help groups self-help groups are there, and various NGOs they are working. This entire group should be clubbed together, and this community kitchen should be run with free from any political intervention or any preference to a particular group X or group Y. So if that can be done, certainly these poor people who are thinking that it is better to die in COVID-19 rather to die in starvation, I think that we can arrest, we can take a kind of a proper intervention we can make. Second is that a money transfer can be made. So certain amount of money, 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees is being transferred. So if we have roughly calculated, we have seen that the amount of food grains we are giving to them, and the poverty estimate that we are having, which is something around 1,500 rupees, that if it is for individual income, if it's fall below that, then he is absolutely poor. So if we take a threshold of say 1,500 rupees and another 4,300 rupees or 4,000 rupees for food basket, and if we take this together, so something around 6,000 rupees per month for our individual, if we can spend, certainly people of 80% of the people who are having uncertainty of their life as well as livelihood can be taken care of, number one. And if they have some kind of income, and there is certain sectors, say rural, especially the agricultural season is coming, is just at the doorstep. It might, hopefully that it will go well. And this informal sector and all these migrant laborers, daily wage earners, if they have a certainty of some amount of income for their family and food is ensured, even a little bit of revival of economy, demand will come from this segment. And if we can sustain with that particular process, certainly then economic revival is possible. Because as I mentioned again, I can take n number of steps, I can inject any amount of money for industrial productions to kickstart the economy, but until unless there is an increase in the demand, especially for the not for the for the people like us that who are salaried people, or 10% salaried people, rather 80% of the people who are mostly either in agricultural sector or informal sector. If we fail to increase their income to direct cash transfer as well as through food transfer, economic revival, demand will not increase. And until unless demand will increase, the economy will not move forward. So there is a supply side intervention. Now we require a social intervention. We need to think the complete reorientation of the healthcare system that we are in place in our country. And third, the important part is that we need to ensure food as well as income for the 80% of the people. Then only the demand will increase, and if demand increases, certainly the economic revival will take place. But see, the growth rate is estimated something around 1.2%, and it may be below that, which India has never experienced. But whatever budget allocations we are having last year, and we made like 3% fiscal deficit, since it has been told by the IMF that you have to maintain that. So deficit, we need to increase the deficit budget. Let the budget deficit increase. There is no harm of having a higher budget deficit. Until unless if our country's people, majority of the people, if they don't survive economically as well as health-wise, then budget deficit, the figure of budget deficit will be meaningless. So therefore, let kind of government think that let the budget deficit may increase, but we have a kind of a demand side intervention, and demand side intervention should be targeted to these 80% of the people, and irrespective of the nature of employment or irrespective of the nature of their kind of a location, that should be taken care of. And for this particular process, not only that government will intervene, but the self-help group as well as the different NGOs and maybe the cooperatives and system can be thought of, that they can take care together, and these people should be taken care of. If that is happened, then certainly the fight against coronavirus will be there. It will continue. Possibly, we don't know how long it is going to be continued, but certain segment of our people, or the majority segment of the people, will not die in starvation. If they don't die in starvation, they will become the human capital, and it is the investment on human capital that can bring growth to the economy. So with that words, my whatever the discussion we thought of, I can to an end, and I say thank you thank you all. And if there is any questions and all, because I was actually a little bit of sketchy and moving from kind of randomly moving from one part to another, not very well constructed in that way. But nevertheless, you have any questions that I can take things and your Zoom thing, whether it will allow it to just continue, that is another thing we need to think. Yes, any questions from anyone?
Tom, would you like to ask something?
We can't hear you, Shubham. Apparently, his
Tom,
speaker is not working. Sir, Anjan sir, আমার একটা question আছে. It's kind of very plain. I was just wondering if, maybe the startup companies or something like that, which you call the startup firms, how can they contribute to the economic system? Because the pandemic situation has completely, it's completely taken over the world, and there's this economic crisis that's going on. So, do you think that the startup system or the startup firms could do a bit better in terms of employment scenario?
See, that startup is a concept. In terms of concept, there is no wrong with that particular concept. The problem is that, see, this economic slowdown or the absolute recession is not only we are facing, but it's the country like US and the entire Europe, they are facing. Now, if you look at our trading partner, basically the major trading partner is China, US, in Hong Kong, and this United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. These are the major trading partners. Okay, and we have certainly we don't rely on export only. So therefore, if you look from that external perspective, certainly hardly any its demand is coming from that particular region. This is number one. Problem number two is that our existing economic structure and enterprises, they are they require some kind of a constant support for revival. So therefore, that is another area which require a serious intervention. And as I mentioned you earlier, that if until and unless there is an income is being raised for the first section of the people, especially those who are generally we call the marginal group, but the marginal group is kind of 80%. So then any business you start, you require a buyer for that. But nevertheless, see, we need to see that medium and small scale enterprises is the backbone of our economy always. It's not the big industries, they are the backbone. So a startup and medium and small scale industries, and as well as rural agro-based industries, can be thought of and can be kind of conceived. Say, for example, I'm giving you that, say, for take the example of West Bengal. Now, West Bengal, we have a kind of producing good amount or huge amount of rice over time. But over times, we are also producing vegetables as well as fruits that have come in big way, flowers that have come up in different regions in big way. Now, see, the people, those who are, say, for example, in certain segment of the people in the agricultural sector, landholding is small. They find it the income they are having, they find it difficult to sustain. So they are thinking of migrating. Now, see, these people, and if they say, for example, if you take the example of fruits, if you take the example of flowers, and if the startup can be linked with that, certainly there would be kind of a change in the scenario of the rural economy. That's pretty sure. And you will be having not only demand within the state, but outside the state also there will be a kind of demand. From that perspective, certainly is good. And again, I told you the medium and small scale industries is good, because see that we do not have a big industry, because when there is a big industry, it is supported by medium and small scale enterprises, because they provide the, say we have a, say for example, let's say we have a kind of a Maruti is producing here. But it's not that Maruti is producing all the parts. All the parts are basically produced and supplied by the MSME, medium and small scale enterprises. So since we are not industrialized per se, but the startup can be very well concept for rural economy, revival of rural economy.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Som, you are audible.
Yes. Now that it was mute then. I have a question to you. Now you must have heard that recently Japan has made a recent decision by which Japan is giving incentive to its companies to move its production units from China to elsewhere. And also many other countries are also considering moving their production units from China to other countries. So if such investment, if India attracts such investments, and also as you know, recently also Dr. Raghuram Rajan, he has also pointed out in an interview that our, as far as our foreign exchange reserve, we have around 450 billion or something like that. We have foreign exchange reserve.
Yeah.
Also, there is also RBI has surplus funds. So we have a somewhat economic base for attracting
We have an
investment.
asset. We have a good amount of asset. It's
Assets. So
not
do you
that.
think that we can
Yeah.
foreign investment?
Yeah, it's a way. Now see the problem. It's if, when you take up the issue of China. Now, what happened that there was a crash in the share market, no? And the most of the FDI were because China is attracting the highest amount of foreign direct investment, especially from America and Europe. Now, when there is a crash in the share market, and those economies, Europe as well as the America's economies, was not in a position to sustain, and China was started buying those companies. Now, and it created a huge panic. The countries of Europe as well as America, they thought that okay, we invested with a reason, with a purpose that cost of production will be low. Therefore, in a low cost, things can be produced. Now, then, what happened that China, by taking the advantage of crash in the share market, they started purchasing those companies, and then it created a real panic across the world. And that trigger them to think that what should we do, that should we take out move out from China and go elsewhere. Yeah, certainly from that perspective we think that India, certainly there was a kind of also for the infrastructure is concerned, there was quite a good amount of improvement in the infrastructure, and there are a lot of, though we thought the ease of business and all those things are being coined. I don't know how prompt that works, but even if it may be less prompt, but since we have a huge number of skilled workers, because we are exporting skilled workers to the other countries, so therefore India might be have where this we have a surplus labor and surplus skilled labor. So therefore, there is a possibility that FDI can be moved to India. So that possibility is there, that cannot be ruled out. And let me add to it that Bangladesh is also kind of it's a very good destination, and they are progressing really well, moving their economies moving really well. Such a small country, their performance is really eye-catching nowadays. So we can also think in that light. Okay, because it's a good bit of idea.
Yes, yes. I was wanted to talk about Bangladesh. So in the SAARC region, now there is a new resurgence of the SAARC, as Prime Minister Modi is also going for SAARC-based cooperation. He made the SAARC emergency COVID fund also. So do you think, we have the the SAARC, there is a free trade area, SAFTA. So the SAFTA hasn't been very, very much effective. So do you think there can be, we can move towards more effective free trade also, as India did not even join the RCEP, regional partnership. So
SAFTA, see that from since the inception of the SAFTA, it is a non-starter kind of a thing, because of the geopolitical relationship we are having with our neighbors. Number one, and number two, see the influence of China, especially a few with our neighbors. That was made the situation complicated. I am not an expert, or you are the expert. I'm not expert of international relations. But what I understand that we have a hostile neighbor, not hostile in that sense, but certainly their economy is not being controlled by India, but much of the economy is being controlled by China. So if you look the amount of investment that China made in Sri Lanka, even they are making huge investment in Bangladesh, they are making huge investment in Myanmar, they are making huge, Nepal is already kind of after the monarchy left, there was a kind of a tilt towards China, and there is a naturally, if someone cater me more, I'll move towards them. From that perspective, India, though pretends that we are the big brother attitude is not very good, I understand. but certainly how far India would be able to penetrate in this after that is the question. That's the question. But maybe the BIMSTEC is kind of the BIMSTEC is much possibly is a better platform. We can say.
No, what I was asking is that as you have seen the recent that IMF and World Bank, what their projections have given for all the SAARC countries, whether it is Nepal, whether it is Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, they all will have very low growth rates. My question was there, China is not so much economically affected. So my point is, and China is it's a superpower now. So what my question was that these SAARC countries, they need to stick together, in order to tide this water. So do you think there will be increased cooperation, economic cooperation in the coming months and years?
I perceive it in different ways. See that China's after economic slowdown, they have projected their growth rate at 6.3%. Okay. Now, if you look from that perspective, even I find that India should go more closer to China, because that would be easier, because no longer, okay, I mean, US might be a strategic partner, Israel might be a strategic partner, but your economic condition is such that even your test kit now, everything like, if you take medicine, 65% of medicine is coming from China. So there is a strong possibility that India, that Indo-China relationship will be revisited, and might be we can see that India is a small brother and China is a big brother, and some kind of friendship may help India. So that kind of changes may take place. And there you can think then, okay, it's the inter-south country with China and then Brazil, and then maybe from that side Russia, new kind of dynamics may emerge. We don't know.
Thank you. Lisha, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question anymore. Thank you so much, sir.
A question? Poulomi, do you have a question?
I don't think so.
Poulomi was jotting down possibly. So,
Poulomi, do you have a question? Oh, Poulomi is not unmuted. Yes, yes. Wait. Let me unmute her.
yes. Okay.
I think you have muted yourself. Wait, tell her. Okay, let me text. Oh, now, yes, you're on.
Yes. Yeah. So, sir, I would like to ask something. It's not well constructed question, but still I will going to ask it. So
Even my lecture was also not very well constructed. So it's
no, sir, it's lovely, sir. It's lovely hearing from you. So I would like to ask that, as we can see now that America is no longer going to be the world domination country after the global pandemic coronavirus. So every other country is looking upon India, and as a guardian, as someone who is giving medicine, someone is helping all the other countries on that basis, on that day. So would what your views on that India can be the next there is China also, the world domination, but China has all countries are looking upon China as the enemy now. So India has a bright side in the future. What do you think on that?
no, actually, I just now the previous question, the question from after I told that the economic reality is such that we should have a better relationship. We have to forge a better relationship with China, because China is also a kind of a strong trading partner of India. So, given the scenario that might be, we had a very good strategic relationship with US, I told earlier. But okay, that's different altogether. But so far the economic thing is concerned, I think we need to be more closely work with China. And now, whether you can trust China or you cannot trust China, that's a kind of a $1 million question. But still, we are like the highest amount of import is coming from China again. I told you that 65% of the medicine is coming from China. And forget, if you take the say any paint industry, you take any industry, the raw material, most of the things are coming from China. So we need to have a possibly better trade relationship with China that will augur well for Indian economy. And see, and we cannot ignore their supremacy anymore. We cannot look at eye to eye. We tried, we pretended, but now what? In changing world scenario, China will be more powerful. So you have to be kind of closer to be a power. Now, if the power is kind of a US is so far away, China is much more nearby. And you are talking about this, you look his policies and all those were there. And if at any point of time it so happens that India and China is working in tandem, because they cannot work in tandem, there is always like a kind of a love and hate relationship is there. And in many forums we find that okay, China is not in our side, but possibly we have to move closer to them. And how it will take place, maybe I don't know. It's kind of at the international relations, those who are handling the issues, possibly they can handle it in a better way. But the reality is that we need to be closer to China. There is no other alternative, because see, we have to accept their supremacy now. Rather, the part of the world they have to accept their supremacy. Economic supremacy is the ultimate supremacy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you hearing from you. Lovely hearing from you.
Anyone else has a question? I think not. Anyone else?
No, it's okay. Yeah. Actually, I think from the discussion of Dr. Chakraborty, we have got an overview of the aftermath effect of post-COVID situation. Basically, the economic effect, and we thank you for that. Though all this we are assuming, but I think this situation, if this situation prevails, the condition will be whatever we are assuming. I think it will be same as that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I remain like a kind of from the beginning of this journey of the Tilottama Foundations, off and on I used to be there. Any academic exercise, so whenever it has been initiated by you, I always find it it's encouraging for me to be part of that. I hope that in future also, and you are a very dynamic group, and like doing many kind of work simultaneously. So I wish you all the best. And for academic journey, we'll always be there. So, and you have a better future for Tilottama Foundation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So even it's nice even meeting in online in a way, because
Yes.
we are planning
Thank
to meet
Yeah,
at Calcutta, and many a times it didn't work, but at least we met finally. Thank you.
yes. It's lovely, sir, hearing from you.